Get the fuck out of there. The president isn't commanding troops. He's yelling at his own Secret Service agent, voice cracking, hands trembling. Behind him, a video plays on loop. Donald Jr., smiling, shaking hands with a cartel boss. One briefcase, $108 million. Cocaine stacked like embassy documents. A whisper. My father cleared the border himself. The lights are hot, the cameras are live, and the leader of the free world is unraveling, sir, in front of 82 million viewers. A bead of sweat falls from the tip of the president's nose. Not because the room is warm. It's not. It's kept at a presidential 67 degrees. But the heat right now isn't from the lights. It's from the woman standing across from him, holding a red folder like it's a murder weapon. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Jasmine Crockett looks at the president as if he were already halfway buried. This, she says, setting the folder on the desk between them with the care of someone presenting a loaded firearm, contains certified transaction logs from 3 offshore banks, Cayman, Belize, and Panama. She lets that sit, lets America lean forward. Those logs show 108.3 million US dollars transferred through a shell company operated by Donald J. Trump Jr., just 48 hours after a private meeting with a senior figure in the Sinaloa cartel. Trump blinks. Once, twice. The silence is the kind that precedes a thunderclap. Behind them on the screen, the video plays again, but this time it's slowed. The moment freezes on Donald Jr.'s handshake. The camera zooms on the briefcase. Another freeze. Bricks of cocaine lined behind the sofa like books on a shelf. A voice, clear and arrogant. Borders handled. My father's already cleared it. The room doesn't breathe. Trump opens his mouth to speak, but nothing comes. He looks down at the folder like it might catch fire. A vein in his temple pulses violently. Across the stage, the moderator, Lester Holt, looks like he's bracing for a nuclear blast. Jasmine doesn't blink. She slides out the top sheet, reads aloud, calm as a surgeon. Transaction ID GTD X72440. Beneficiary Blackfence Global Logistics. Amount $108,312,000. Authorized by, she flips to the second page, a printout of a signed Department of Homeland Security waiver. One signature, stylized, familiar. Donald J. Trump. Trump finally speaks. A rasp. This is fake. This is fabricated. AI. No, Jasmine interrupts, and her voice is glassy, almost sharp and see-through. This isn't AI. This is government-issued documentation verified by FinCEN, Interpol, and 2 Senate subcommittees. She steps forward. It has your son's passport number. It has your security clearance code, and it has your authorization to open the Laredo corridor for exactly 72 hours. He says the oxygen into the room vanishes. In the audience, someone gasps. Someone else swears under their breath. A camera angle shifts to a live split screen. Jasmine on one side, her hand steady, Trump on the other, visibly trembling. She turns to the crowd, not to win them, but to awaken them. This is what corruption looks like when it stops hiding. Click. Another page lands on the desk. This one has time-stamped surveillance stills. Junior stepping off a government aircraft, the cartel SUV waiting, the briefcase being loaded. You gave a narco state direct access to our border. You didn't just fail to stop the poison. You profited from it. Trump takes one step back. It's subtle, but the nation sees it. Behind them, the American flag shudders in the AC like it's flinching. Jasmine lowers the folder, looks at the man who once called her a radical embarrassment. There is no rage in her expression now. Only clarity, only law. History won't remember your slogans. It will remember this. No one moves, not the moderators, not the aides, not the agents in the wings. For 12 full seconds, the world stands still, waiting to see what a president does when the truth finally rips the mask off. He doesn't speak. He doesn't deny. He just stares. eyes glassy, mouth slightly open, as the screen behind them goes dark. And in that darkness, the truth echoes louder than anything he's ever shouted. The city was already trembling before she arrived. A humid wind pressed against the glass of the NBC tower in Midtown, like Manhattan itself was holding its breath. A line of armored black Suburbans slid into the private entrance beneath the studio just as the sky began to dim. Jasmine Crockett stepped out first. She was dressed in black, not for style, for intent. No one spoke as she walked past security. They didn't need to. Every person she passed seemed to know something seismic was coming. She wasn't here to be featured. She was here to detonate. Her aide, Malik, hustled behind her, gripping a hard case folder that looked more like a weapons crate than a document container. She didn't ask if he had it. She already knew. Inside that case were the keys to something far greater than scandal, the collapse of a presidency. They entered the green room, cold, quiet. The overhead lights flickered as if even electricity hesitated to be part of tonight. Jasmine turned to Malik, voice low, controlled, like a sniper sighting in. "We get one shot," she said, "one. If I miss, he walks out stronger than ever." Malik gave a tight nod. "Understood." She looked out the soundproof window. The debate stage was being polished. Microphones tested, flags perfectly fanned. It looked official, safe, but Jasmine knew. It was a killing floor dressed up in democracy. She opened the folder herself. The first item, a copy of Transaction ID for GTE S72440, verified by FinCEN, $108. $3 million, broken into 5 staggered amounts, all traceable to a front company registered in Belize 2 years ago. The second, aerial photos from DEA drones over Sonora, time-stamped and cross-referenced with border checkpoint downtimes that had been signed off personally by Donald J. Trump. The third item was the blade, a single audio clip, 12 seconds long, recorded from inside a Cartel SUV, the voice unmistakable. "The corridor will be cleared. He signed off himself. You've got 72 hours. Move the product." Jasmine closed the folder. She didn't feel fear, not anymore. She'd felt it 6 months ago when the whistleblower, a trembling DEA analyst from San Antonio, had slipped her the first breadcrumb. She'd felt it when they ran facial recognition on the men shaking Donald Jr.'s hand and came back with Interpol red notices. She'd felt it when she watched young mothers bury their sons who overdosed on fentanyl that came through untraceable corridors. But now she felt something colder. Purpose, her phone buzzed. "Unknown, be careful what you say tonight. We're watching." She read it, smiled faintly, and powered the phone off without replying. At 18:24, a stage manager knocked. "You're up for prep," he said, trying and failing to sound casual. She nodded once. Malik didn't move. They didn't need to rehearse. Jasmine Crockett had rehearsed this moment every day for 6 months. As she walked toward the stage, her heels clicking down the hallway like a metronome of war, she thought about how fragile power truly was. Not the kind in polls or headlines. Real power. The kind that thinks it's untouchable. The kind that lets a man sign off a border waiver for cartel access, just so his son could cash out offshore. She thought of the flag, the people, the mothers who would never see their children again because addiction had become business, and business had been protected by the Oval Office. And she made a choice, right there in that hallway. Tonight, I am not coming for applause. Tonight, I am not coming to debate. I am coming to deliver justice on live television, with the world watching. She stepped onto the edge of the studio floor. Trump was already there, surrounded by handlers, laughing too loudly at something no one else found funny. He hadn't seen her yet, didn't even glance her way. Maybe he thought she was just another talking head, another blue-suited critic to swat down with a one-liner and a smirk. He didn't know he was walking into his own prosecution. Not yet. She handed the red folder to the stage tech for safekeeping behind the podium. No script, No backup, just evidence and intent. By 1851, the lights were locked, the cameras calibrated, the audience seated. By 1930, the countdown had begun. And by 2003, as the final LED screen flickered to life, she would stand in front of him, calm, unshaking, and show him, the nation, and the world what it looks like when truth walks into power's house without knocking. The stage was immaculate, sterilized, precise, almost surgical. 4 white leather chairs arranged in an arc, 2 water bottles on a brushed steel table between them, a backdrop of polished walnut and deep blue banners bearing the words, "American Leadership in Crisis." The irony was acidic. This wasn't just a televised event. This was a political crucible, forged by necessity, forced into existence by headlines that wouldn't die, by lawmakers who could no longer look away, by a population spiraling in disbelief that the President of the United States might be tied, directly, financially, legally, to the very cartels he'd vowed to crush. Technically, this was a town hall, but there was nothing casual about it. No red, white, and blue confetti. No folksy banter from the audience. This wasn't a meet the voters handshake circus. It was a stage dressed for war, a format created in an emergency session after 5 congressional committees demanded that President Trump answer, live, and unfiltered for the growing whispers around his son. He had tried to decline. The White House issued 3 refusals, then a list of preferred moderators, then a demand that Jasmine be replaced by Bama, a less antagonistic voice. All were denied. The pressure mounted. Networks threatened to boycott the next State of the Union. Intelligence Committee members leaked damning details to the press, enough to spook donors, if not yet voters. Cornered, Trump agreed. Officially, he called it a chance to clear the air. Privately, he called it a fucking trap. That morning, he told his inner circle, "It's a show trial. They want ratings. Lester Holt will play judge, Jasmine will play assassin, and I'm supposed to stand there like a target with a flag behind me." Then he laughed, bitter and hoarse. "But they forgot I don't lose on television." He wasn't entirely wrong. In truth, the room had been designed with surgical intent. NBC had handpicked the 4 journalists for their reputations as methodical, evidence-obsessed interrogators. Maya Reynolds, Pulitzer-winning veteran from The Atlantic. Raul Herrera, senior investigator for ProPublica. Jasmine El-Tayeb, former war correspondent turned domestic accountability bulldog. And Noah Chen, whose public record sleuthing had exposed 3 governors and a pharmaceutical giant. The 12 citizens in the audience weren't chosen at random either. They represented 6 swing states. All had lost family to cartel-driven violence or opioid overdoses. They weren't props. They were proof. Flesh and memory and grief woven into this national reckoning. At center stage, Lester Holt reviewed his cards, lips tight. He hadn't been this nervous since moderating the 2020 debates. This wasn't theater. It was televised democracy on edge, and he knew the weight of what was coming. But Jasmine, she didn't pace. She didn't rehearse. She stood stage right, back straight, eyes focused, hands resting lightly on the red folder placed beneath her podium. She wasn't thinking about viewership numbers or approval ratings. She wasn't thinking about applause. She was thinking about timing. There would be a moment, one perfect opening, and when it came, she would land a strike that couldn't be spun, shouted down, or denied. From backstage, Trump made his entrance, grinning too hard, waving like it was a campaign rally. He made a show of pulling Lester Holt in for a handshake, then turned toward the audience and delivered a line preloaded for social media. "Feels good to be here, in front of Americans, not Twitter mobs." Polite laughter, uneasy. He didn't look at Jasmine. Not yet. She, in turn, offered nothing. Not a glance, not a reaction, just silence. The 2 of them were now locked into an orbit of quiet detonation. The cameras panned wide, the intro music played, the screen flashed the segment title, Town Hall Special, Live, Leadership Under Scrutiny. The clock hit 20 on Aishamam. Three deep tones sounded from the broadcast timer. The red recording lights snapped on. America inhaled, and Jasmine exhaled. Not from nerves, but control. Like a runner at the edge of the block. Like a violinist tuning one final string before the downbeat. They would begin with questions about national integrity, about ethics, border policy, white-collar crime, all of its surface, and she would let it play until the moment came, the moment where fact met fraud, and the president would finally come face to face, not with his enemies, but with his own reflection, framed in numbers, video frames, and signatures. The town hall wasn't the battlefield. It was the scalpel, and Jasmine Crockett had come to cut the rot from the throne. The broadcast opened clean, 3 wide camera sweeps. Lester Holt, centered beneath the glow of the town hall logo, welcomed the nation with the practiced calm of a man who knew chaos was coming and had decided to shake its hand. He turned to the president first because he had to. "Mr. President," Lester began, voice steady, "in light of recent public concern, I'd like to ask you a question that speaks not to policy, but to personal integrity. Do you believe that those in your immediate family should be held to the same ethical standards as those who serve under your administration?" Trump gave his signature pause, the 3-second media beat he'd mastered over years of live television. Then the grin came, wide and slow, like he was about to tell a joke he thought would end the segment. "I believe my family has been attacked more viciously than any in political history," he said. "And frankly, I think we've held up better than most. No indictments, no handcuffs, no mugshots." A glance at Jasmine. "Yet." Lester blinked, stayed neutral. Trump continued, oozing casual dominance. "My children are private citizens. They don't answer to government panels. They don't carry badges or vote on budgets. What they do, legally, is their business, not mine." It was meant to be a wall. Jasmine saw a door. Her turn. She leaned forward, not aggressive, not confrontational, conversational, a gesture of curiosity, almost admiration. "Mr. President," she said softly, "you mentioned your children don't vote on budgets or carry badges. But would you say, as Commander-in-Chief, you are aware of who uses military aircraft under executive clearance?" Trump waved a hand, already half dismissive. "We log everything. But no, I don't sit in a room approving passenger lists for every flight. I'm a president, not a travel agent." Polite laughter from the audience. Uncertain, strained. Jasmine smiled gently, as if charmed by his wit. "So just to clarify, you don't sign off or personally track the use of Air Force assets for family travel?" Trump chuckled. "I'm sure there's a form somewhere. But again, I have generals, schedulers, security teams. I trust my people, and I certainly don't micromanage who flies where for what, especially if it's my son visiting." He paused. "A foreign business partner, or whatever." There it was. The silence after that phrase, foreign business partner, was thinner than air, sharp enough to cut through skin. A few journalists in the front row exchanged looks. One of them, Raul Herrera from ProPublica, tapped the edge of his notepad 3 times. Jasmine noticed. Everyone noticed. She didn't move. "Interesting," she said softly. "So if, hypothetically, a member of your immediate family were to use a government aircraft to fly to a meeting with an individual later identified as a cartel operative, you would have no prior knowledge or documentation of that?" Trump didn't hesitate. "None. And if that happened, it would be news to me. Fake news, most likely." Jasmine nodded once, writing nothing. Her hands remained still, her posture relaxed. But inside her skull, gears locked into place. She wasn't improvising. She was executing. "Thank you for your clarity," she said. "Just one more follow-up." Trump smirked. "You're on a roll, Jasmine. Go for it." She raised her eyes, not cold, not hot, just knowing. "Are you aware," she said, "of any financial accounts associated with your family that hold foreign currency tied to logistics, companies operating out of Belize, Panama, or the Cayman Islands?" A new pause, shorter this time. Trump's tongue pressed against the inside of his cheek. His body stiffened just slightly, the way a boxer does when he hears a bell he wasn't ready for. Then casually, "No, never heard of it. Don't know what you're referencing." "Of course," Jasmine said smoothly. "Just establishing a baseline. Thank you." She sat back, but the air around her had changed. Her smile was gone. Her stillness had calcified into intent. She no longer looked like a participant. She looked like a trigger waiting to be pulled. Trump shifted, checked his cufflink. For the first time all night, he looked away from the cameras and into the wings. Jasmine followed his glance, then returned her focus to the red folder beneath her podium. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Because this was the part where the audience thought the worst had passed, that the questions would move on, that the tension would ebb, that the storm had glanced off course. But storms don't fade. They circle, and Jasmine Crockett was about to bring the eye of it home. There was no fanfare, no trumpet, no dramatic sting from the broadcast team. Just Jasmine, steady, still, surgical. She reached beneath her podium and pulled the red folder into view. For a moment, she didn't open it. She let its weight speak first. The camera cut to it, a close-up shot that would, within 15 minutes, be screen-grabbed and memed across the globe. The seal on the cover wasn't congressional. It was Joint Agency, DEA, DHS, Interpol, Cross-Border Trafficking Response Unit. Then she opened it. "There's a common misconception," she began, voice low, conversational, "that when crimes happen at the top, we'll never see the evidence, that the paperwork disappears, the trails get buried, and no one ever gets caught." She raised her eyes toward Trump. Not accusatory, not theatrical, just precise. "But sometimes," she continued, "the paperwork survives." A murmur moved through the room like a nervous heartbeat. Lester Holt leaned forward slightly, off script. The network cut to a wider angle. Something in the director's ear must have said, "Stay live. Don't break. Something's coming." Jasmine held up the first sheet of paper. It was stamped with the Department of Defense flight clearance seal. On June 18th of this year, a military Gulfstream G550 designated under the Presidential Secondary Clearance Code logged a direct flight from Brownsville, Texas to Hermosillo, Sonora, arriving at 11:42 p.m. local time. She placed the paper on the table between them. The passenger manifest lists one civilian, Donald John Trump Jr. The aircraft was accompanied by 2 Secret Service personnel, no journalists, no diplomatic officials, no press record of the trip. Trump's lips parted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. Not yet. Jasmine turned the page. 2 days later, she said, holding up the next document, an electronic funds transfer was executed through the Caribbean International Credit Consortium, totaling $108.3 million, routed through a shell corporation in Belize called Black Fence Global Logistics. She placed it gently beside the flight record. That shell company, Mr. President, was linked last year to at least 7 flagged transactions by FinCEN. And this wire, dated June 20th, 02:18 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, lists as its beneficiary a personal account at Grand Star Cayman Holdings. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't need to. The account is in the name of Donald J. Trump Jr. The transfer was tagged for logistics services rendered. She paused. And yes, that's in quotes. Now the camera's locked on Trump. Not the papers, not Jasmine, him. Because something in his body had shifted. His shoulders weren't square anymore. His posture wasn't rehearsed. His breathing was visible now. Nostrils flaring, lips tightening, the glint of sweat near his collarbone betrayed by high-definition lenses. From the corner of the room, Maya Reynolds from The Atlantic whispered, "Holy fuck," just soft enough to trigger a boom mic pickup. Someone in the broadcast van banged a desk, not from anger but disbelief. Lester, eyes darting between the pages and the president, finally spoke. "Congresswoman Crockett, are you asserting that the president's son—" "I'm not asserting," Jasmine said, cutting him off with grace. "I'm presenting." And then she pulled out the third page. The room went cold. This is a White House memo signed June 17th, one day before the flight. It is an executive security override request authorizing the temporary deactivation of 2 radar corridors along the Laredo sector, citing classified logistical activity under the authority of the commander-in-chief. She tapped the bottom right corner. The signature on that order is Donald J. Trump. Now Trump moved, just slightly, a shift of weight from one leg to the other, the first visible crack in the foundation. It wasn't outrage, it wasn't defiance, it was recognition. Jasmine saw it, the world saw it. He wasn't hearing something new, he was remembering something old, something he thought buried. The temperature shifted, the lights didn't dim, but they felt dimmer. This was no longer a discussion. It wasn't a debate, it was a deposition. Live, raw, with no counsel and no lifeline. And Jasmine wasn't asking permission to proceed. This flight, she said, voice unwavering, was not cleared for diplomatic purpose. The recipient of the $108 million has not filed a single tax disclosure on that transfer. And this radar deactivation in direct connection with a cartel zone constitutes a federal breach of national security protocol. She let the words breathe. Then one final line. Not shouted, not forced, just truth. What we're looking at tonight is not just a scandal, not just a pun. It is facilitated, executive-enabled international trafficking. No one moved, not Trump, not Holt, not the audience, and certainly not Jasmine. 7 days earlier, Washington was already cracking. Rain clung to the city like static. The streets were wet, black with reflection, as if the Capitol itself were ashamed to show its face. Jasmine Crockett sat in the back of an unmarked car parked outside a parking garage 3 blocks from Judiciary Square. No cameras, no notes, no aides. Just her and a man who wouldn't even give his real name. "I only have 20 minutes, he said, handing over a plain manila envelope. "And if I'm caught, this conversation never happened." Jasmine didn't blink. She took the envelope and waited. Inside was a USB drive, blue, scratched, unremarkable. But what it contained would, within the week, become the most volatile package in American political history. She plugged it into an air-gapped laptop at her private residence that night. Alone. Lights dimmed. No sound but the faint tick of a vintage wall clock and the white noise hum of a world about to change. The first file was video, a drone feed, desert horizon, 2 SUVs idling outside a villa compound in Sonora, Mexico. Zoomed in, stabilized, frame by frame, Donald Trump Jr. stepping out of a government-marked Gulfstream jet. He shakes hands with Luis Salgado, a known Sinaloa logistics operator wanted in 3 countries. Jr. smiles, gestures toward the car. 2 men unload a silver case. The exchange takes less than 90 seconds. Then the audio. Grainy, intercepted, but unmistakable. Junior's voice. "Cargo's cleared. He signed it himself. We've got 72 hours before the corridor reactivates. Move fast." And then laughter, off-screen, casual, the laughter of men who believed they were immune. Jasmine sat back, breath shallow. There was a chill in the room that wasn't from the weather. She played it again and again. By the 5th loop, she wasn't shocked anymore. She was angry. The last file was a PDF, high-resolution scans of a contract titled Service Agreement, Cross-Border Materials Logistics. It bore a corporate seal for Black Fence Global, a known front used in prior trafficking investigations. The signer, Donald J. Trump Jr. Payment, $108.3 million, dispersed in staggered Cayman transfers through proxy entities. The language was coded, euphemistic, facilitated transport, unimpeded lanes, clearance window. But the intent was fluorescent. She closed the laptop, exhaled. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at nothing. This was it. The moment every elected official fantasized about, but few ever faced. The possession of truth powerful enough to burn down a throne. And yet, she didn't move. She didn't call DOJ. she didn't call the media. Because she understood something deeper than protocol. Truth was only useful when delivered in front of the right eyes, at the right time, with nowhere left to run. The Department of Justice would drown it in process. Leaks would be plugged, narratives spun. Before the truth had a chance to breathe, it would suffocate in red tape. No, this would not be handled behind closed doors. This had to be public execution, not of a man, but of a lie. The next morning, she made 3 calls. First, to her legal advisor. I want the chain of custody bulletproof. If I touch this in front of America, I want it to bury him, not bounce. Second, to NBC. I want a full debate format reclassified as a town hall. I'm not debating policy, I'm revealing evidence. And finally, to her aide Malik. Prep the red folder, print everything, timestamp it, and make sure it closes with the signature page. I want that signature to be the last thing America sees before he opens his mouth. He didn't ask whose signature. He didn't need to. By 9 o'clock a.m., the red folder was sealed, weighed, and locked. The USB was cloned onto 3 drives, 2 of which were stored in safe deposit boxes in 2 different cities. She didn't trust cloud storage. She didn't trust the system. She only trusted truth and the camera. By the end of the day, NBC had confirmed the broadcast slot. The White House had reluctantly agreed. The moderators were announced. The stage was being built. And Jasmine Crockett? She spent that evening alone, standing in front of a mirror, practicing her opening line. Not to be dramatic, not to perform, but to feel the gravity of it slide off her tongue without shaking. On June 18th, a presidential aircraft carried Donald Trump Jr. to Hermosillo. 2 days later, $188 million moved through a shell company into his Cayman account. The clearance was signed by his father. She said it 3 times. Memorize the cadence, not to rehearse it, but to make it real, because soon it would belong to the world. And the president would be forced to answer it, not behind a podium of flags and fanfare, but under a spotlight hot enough to burn the lies off his skin. Jasmine didn't announce it. She simply raised her eyes to the control booth, gave a single nod, and stepped back from the podium. The stage lights dipped just slightly, not for drama, but because the air itself had changed. Somewhere deep in the control room, a producer gave the order. Roll clip, clean audio, no commentary. And then it began. The screen behind them lit up with a feed timestamp June 18th, 2025. 23:51:07 p.m., overlaid with coordinates just outside Hermosillo, Sonora. Night vision drone footage. Grainy, but clear. 2 SUVs parked side by side under floodlights. The doors opened. A tall figure stepped out of the right vehicle. Light khakis, navy shirt, aviators. The resolution sharpened on his face. Donald Trump Jr., no mistaking him. No ambiguity. He approached the second vehicle. A man stepped out to meet him. Luis Salgado, known alias El Clav, listed on an Interpol red notice since 2021. The 2 shook hands. Brief, professional. Junior turned and gestured to the SUV behind him. A third man exited carrying a silver briefcase. The exchange was clean. The case was opened, not for cash, but for documents. The audio kicked in. Slight lag. Then, this covers transport through the 72-hour corridor. 108 will be in your account by 6 a.m. EST. My father cleared the route personally. The words dropped like bullets across the studio. My father cleared the route personally. Trump shifted in his seat, a visible involuntary movement. Not rage, not defense, but something closer to collapse. His pupils constricted. His lips parted slightly, and for the first time that evening, he looked afraid. The clip continued, a slow pan across the black SUV parked behind Junior. On the left passenger door, clearly visible in the camera's zoom, was a faded but unmistakable decal. U.S. Air Force, Logistical Transport Command. Beneath it, a tail number, AF2173GS, matched exactly to the aircraft listed in the documents Jasmine presented earlier. The shot held for 5 seconds too long enough for anyone watching. in Alabama or Alaska or Arizona to absorb what it meant. This wasn't just collusion. It wasn't just trafficking. It was government-grade machinery used in the service of a cartel payoff. And the president's son was the one delivering it. The screen faded to black. Silence returned. Not heavy, but sharp. Clean. Like the breath before a guillotine drops. Jasmine stepped forward again. She didn't look at Trump. She looked out, beyond the studio, beyond the lights, into the millions of eyes watching through their televisions, their phones, their living rooms turned courtrooms. This is not speculation, she said. This is not an interpretation. This is not media spin. That is your president's son delivering a briefcase of government-sanctioned freedom to an international criminal. Then she turned slowly and looked straight at Trump. You built a wall, Mr. President, but apparently not around your own blood. The control room didn't cut away. Backstage, chaos bloomed. Aide after aide rose from folding chairs. One whispered into a mic. Another frantically gestured toward the stage manager. The White House chief communications officer, once seated confidently in the wings, now stood in place, pale, jaw slack, whispering into a phone as if screaming would break it. Inside the West Wing, according to reports leaked hours later, National Security Advisor Thomas Cade said only 6 words when the footage aired. Tell the president, we're out. By the time the broadcast reached its 20th minute, 4 senior advisors had already left the NBC premises. 2 aides disabled their White House badges remotely. One speechwriter was last seen wiping their name from a briefing binder. And Trump? He hadn't moved. He hadn't spoken. He just sat, sweating beneath a 1,000-watt truth, staring into a silence he could not tweet his way out of. Jasmine didn't press. Not yet. The blade had been shown. Now she was waiting to twist it. Lester Holt's voice cracked slightly as he turned to the audience. We now open the floor to selected questions from American citizens representing communities most affected by cartel violence, border policy, and the opioid epidemic. He didn't need to say more. A figure stood, slowly as though rising from the weight of a memory she could never put down. She wore black, no jewelry, no flag pin, just a simple blouse and a silver chain with a pendant shaped like a heart, cracked down the middle. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the microphone passed to her by the usher. Her voice, however, did not. My name is Rachel Marin, she said. I'm from New Hampshire. I lost my son, Caleb, to fentanyl laced with carfentanil. He was 17, played baseball, he was clean, he made one mistake, and it killed him. The room held its breath. Jasmine lowered her eyes respectfully. Lester nodded, solemn. Trump looked straight at the floor. Rachel's voice didn't waver. Mr. President, I voted for you twice. I believed you when you said you would clean the border. You called the cartels animals. You promised us you'd be ruthless with them. That no one would be safe if they brought poison into this country. She paused, wiping her face, not for drama, but because grief doesn't know ratings. And now, tonight, I've watched video of your son shaking hands with one of the men responsible for flooding our streets with that same poison. I heard him say that you cleared the route. Her voice dropped, but it hit harder than any shout could. You said you'd clear the border, but it looks like your son cleared the road for them. So I want to ask you, as a mother who buried her child, did you clear the road for the cartel, Mr. President? No one moved. A single tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. Trump lifted his head slowly. His eyes met hers. And for a brief second, even through the mask of power and performance, something flickered behind them. A flicker of guilt, of recognition, or perhaps the realization that in this exact moment, his authority was irrelevant. His office couldn't protect him. Not from a mother's question. He opened his mouth, closed it, shifted, cleared his throat. But no words came. Nothing prepared him for this. Not the years of rallies, not the war rooms, not the lawyers, because power can deflect facts, but it cannot deflect pain. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. This wasn't her moment. It belonged to Rachel and the millions watching who had lost someone or feared they might, who'd watched their leaders scream about drugs, crime, borders, while protecting the very ones who profited from the chaos. Rachel's voice came one last time, softer now. I don't care about party lines. I don't care about left or right. I care that my son is in the ground, and your son is in a deal. She sat down. She didn't look at Jasmine. She didn't need to. The connection between them was forged in something older than politics. It was forged in loss. And across the nation, a collective silence fell. It wasn't the silence of confusion or anticipation. It was the silence that follows a truth too real to spin, too sharp to dismiss. One that doesn't ask for approval. It just sits in your lungs and chokes you until you stop pretending it's not there, mabung. The camera caught Trump blinking, swallowing, then nothing. No response, no prepared line. He wasn't facing a political opponent. He was facing a mother who wanted to know why her child was dead and why his wasn't. Lester's voice came back, hollow and unsure. We thank you, Ms. Morin, for your courage. Then after a long pause, we'll take a short break. Please stay with us. But no one left their seats, and no one, not the studio, not the stage, not the audience, not the White House, would ever be the same again. The silence hung like glass, too heavy to hold, too fragile to keep. You could feel it, as if the room itself were afraid to breathe. The nation was watching, and no one wanted to blink first. And then he snapped. Trump surged forward. Not in a measured way, not with the polish of a statesman, but like a cornered animal that finally realized the walls weren't made of press conferences anymore. He stepped out from behind his podium and crossed the stage, not briskly, not calmly, but with a kind of unhinged gravity. His footsteps hit the floor like dropped gavels. And for the first time that night, the cameras didn't follow him. They stayed on Jasmine, because she didn't move. He stopped 2 feet from her on him, finger pointed, jaw clenched. I'm the President of the United States, he barked, voice thick with fury. Who the hell are you to stand there and lecture me on my son, on logistics, on documents you don't understand? He waved a hand toward the audience, toward the moderators, toward the entire crumbling illusion of control. This whole thing is a damn setup. You people don't care about truth. You care about cameras. You care about ratings. I built this country back from the brink, and now you want to crucify me because of some offshore form and an audio clip. His voice cracked on the last syllable. And that's when everyone knew it wasn't righteous indignation. It was panic dressed in patriotism. Still, Jasmine didn't flinch. She waited, watched, measured. And then, without raising her voice, without breaking the steady rhythm of her breath, she answered, You're the president. You've said it all night. We know. Her tone was calm, but the silence that followed it was surgical. If you hold that title, she continued, then you also hold the weight that comes with it. You don't get to weaponize it when it suits you and abandon it when it doesn't. Trump opened his mouth, but she kept going. If your son received $108 million from a cartel and used a military asset to deliver that arrangement, and if you signed the waiver that cleared the corridor that allowed that shipment to happen, she stepped forward now. Not aggressive, not performative, just present, tall, unshaken. Then you didn't just fail as a father. Her eyes narrowed, cold and deliberate. You compromised the security of this nation. You enabled organized crime at a governmental level. You sold operational clearance like it was a family coupon. And now you're standing here, not to defend the Constitution, not to protect the people, but to protect yourself. His face flushed red. His mouth twitched. But he said nothing, because there was nothing left. So she gave him the final blow. If you can't face a mother who buried her son, if you can't answer to the facts in front of your face, if you let your own blood sign a deal with cartels using your name, your signature, your silence, she looked him dead in the eyes, then you don't deserve that podium. You don't deserve that title. You don't deserve this country. Beat, quiet, then the words that would travel the world in seconds. So get the fuck out of there. The room didn't cheer, it didn't gasp. It just sat, paralyzed, stunned into stillness by the blunt weight of something too real to rebut. Trump stepped back, mouth slightly open. He looked out across the studio, but saw no allies, no hands reaching for rescue, no aides whispering strategies. The oxygen was gone, and the room was hers now. Jasmine turned away, not out of arrogance but conclusion. Her job was done, and for the first time in modern American history, a sitting president had been told, live, unfiltered, under oath of public conscience, to leave. The silence had lasted all of 8 seconds, and then America exploded. The first tremor hit Twitter. A user from Michigan clipped the final 12 seconds of Jasmine's closing words and posted it with a single caption. She said it to his face. Cartel president. It had 3.2 million views in 12 minutes. By the end of the hour, that same clip had more engagement than the Super Bowl halftime show. TikTok duets stacked up by the hundreds. Instagram reels spliced Jasmine's voice over slow zooms of the American flag. YouTube streamers went live in stunned disbelief, parsing every frame like it was footage from the moon landing. On CNN's Kron, breaking Jasmine Crockett to President Trump. You don't deserve this country. On MSNBC, Cartel president trends worldwide after live town hall. Bombshell. Even Fox News couldn't avoid it. Their headline read, shakily neutral, stunning showdown at town hall. Crockett tells president to step down. Within 40 minutes, 538 released a snap poll conducted by Ipsos, Trump approval. Before broadcast, 44%, Trump approval. After 22%. The poll didn't just reflect disapproval, it reflected collapse. In swing counties across Pennsylvania, Arizona, Wisconsin, independent voters flipped. One respondent simply typed, I believed in him. Now I just feel betrayed. Another, I lost my nephew to fentanyl. I saw that mother. I heard him lie. I'm done. A senior strategist at the RNC texted a Politico reporter 3 words. It's over. Completely. Another Republican operative, speaking on background to The Atlantic, didn't mince words. Trump is politically dead. She didn't just wound him, she finished him. And everyone inside the White House knows it. The White House itself had gone dark. Not literally, but functionally. Staffers stopped responding to emails. Press Secretary Ann Givens canceled her scheduled appearance on Morning America. 3 senior advisors shut off their government-issued phones. One communications director was seen pacing outside a side entrance, chain-smoking, whispering, we don't have a play for this. We don't have one. Inside the West Wing, sources reported that Trump was still in the executive residence, refusing to speak to anyone except his son. According to one aide, Jr. had already started drafting a statement, one that refused everything, but no one believed would land. Back in the town hall studio, Jasmine stood just off stage. Her eyes didn't waver as the lights dimmed. She wasn't watching the monitors. She didn't need to, because outside, the world was reacting in real time. Jasmine Breaker had passed 1 million mentions by the 36-minute mark. TikTok users began stitching her closing words over speeches by MLK, over film scenes from Aaron Brockovich, over explosions from Marvel trailers. The cultural machine was catching up to what the political one had tried to deny. This wasn't a moment. It was a rupture. At 9:22 p.m., the New York Times notified a breaking opinion piece titled, When Truth Grabs the Mic, Jasmine Crockett and the Night the Presidency Buckled. The opening line, there will be debates about what happened tonight, but none about who owned it. By 9:40, NPR had confirmed that 5 major Republican donors had frozen their contributions to the Trump 2026 PAC. One, speaking anonymously, said, I didn't sign up to bankroll narco-patriarchy. I signed up for tax cuts. And yet, the most haunting response didn't come from Twitter, from Congress, or from late-night pundits. It came from Rachel Marin, the mother who had spoken only moments earlier. She posted a photo of her son's gravestone on Facebook. No caption, just a quote, typed beneath, "If this is what justice looks like, then maybe tonight my son can finally sleep." It was shared 8.4 million times. America wasn't watching anymore. It was choosing. By midnight, the screenwriters had already lost control of the story. This wasn't television anymore. This wasn't rhetoric. This was velocity. And it belonged to no one, not the networks, not the White House, not even Jasmine Crockett. It belonged to the facts and the fire they had lit. The first tremor came from the Hoover Building. At 12:14 a.m., the FBI's Criminal Investigations Division released an unprecedented midnight press bulletin. A formal subpoena has been issued to Mr. Donald J. Trump Jr., requiring immediate appearance before a federal grand jury convened under seal. Non-compliance will result in an escalated enforcement directive. The wording was sterile, but the intent was seismic. By 12:40, the sealed court order had been leaked to Reuters. A second document soon followed. This one marked Interpol, Red Notice Draft. It confirmed that, should Donald Jr. attempt to leave U.S. jurisdiction, a Class A international fugitive classification would be activated. 4 nations, including Mexico, Spain, Colombia, and the UK, pre-cleared extradition authorization within the hour. It was no longer just about truth. Now it was about custody. CNN cut into its midnight rerun with an emergency chyron. Breaking: Trump Jr. Now subject to international pursuit, FBI activates legal strike. At 1:03 a.m., former U.S. Attorney Rebecca Mendez went live on MSNBC, her voice measured but unmistakably energized. "We're witnessing the convergence of political collapse and criminal justice. For years, we asked when the system would push back. Well, it just did, with teeth." Simultaneously, inside the Capitol, the wheels began turning. Representative Andrea Walters, D. Oregon, chairwoman of the House Committee on Oversight, announced an emergency session vote to authorize the formation of a special congressional commission under the Constitutional Emergency Clause. At 2:11 a.m. it passed, 314 to 121. 12 Republicans broke ranks. One of them, speaking anonymously to The Hill, said, "I didn't run for office to protect crime. I ran to protect a country. If you watch that video and still have doubts, you're no longer in public service. You're in public denial." The new commission would carry sweeping powers, full subpoena authority, cross-agency coordination, and the ability to recommend charges to the Department of Justice. Its official title, United States Special Committee for the Investigation of Executive Complicity in Transnational Criminal Operations. Unofficially, it was called the Cartel Inquiry. Its first public hearing was scheduled before the end of the week. But that wasn't all. Behind closed doors, the DOJ had already been preparing. Sources inside the Office of Special Counsel confirmed that a short list of candidates was circulating, prosecutors with high clearance records and 0 political affiliations. The name at the top of the list? Katrina Diaz, former RICO specialist at the Southern District of New York, known for bringing down 2 East Coast mafia families and refusing a federal judgeship because, in her own words, "I wasn't done burning out the rot yet." By sunrise, she would be confirmed. By breakfast, subpoenas would be landing at the gates of Mar-a-Lago. And by mid-morning, the president's legal team, half of whom had not returned phone calls in over 8 hours, would receive word that 3 former cabinet officials had voluntarily agreed to testify before the new committee. And where was Jasmine? She was in her office. Alone, no cameras, no press, just her, a still steaming mug of untouched coffee, and a small television mounted in the corner, muted. On the screen, pundits screamed, hashtags danced, charts plummeted, commentators speculated. But she wasn't watching that. She was reading the line of a document handed to her 48 hours earlier by the whistleblower she still hadn't named. It read, "In authorizing this flight, executive signature 4521A, we acknowledge full understanding of court suspension for logistical discretion." She underlined it twice. Then, for the first time that night, she allowed herself to close her eyes, not in rest, but in resolution, because the country had finally done what so many said it wouldn't. It had watched, it had heard, and now it was about to act. The press lights flared like 1,000 white suns, clustered around the west steps of the Capitol. Rain had threatened the city all afternoon, but never came. Instead, the air was tight, humid, like something had been broken open but not yet washed clean. Jasmine Crockett stood alone at the podium. Behind her, the marble columns of Congress. In front of her, a wall of microphones. Above her, silence, except for the shutter clicks. It had been 18 hours since the town hall, 6 since the FBI's official press conference, 3 since Donald Trump Jr. had reportedly boarded a private jet bound for the Dominican Republic, only to be turned away mid-air by an Interpol no-fly flag. And it had been exactly 2 minutes since Jasmine had stepped outside, unannounced, unguarded, and placed both hands on the podium. She didn't read from a script. There were no cue cards, no speechwriter fingerprints, only truth, and her voice, clear, grounded, slow as justice. I'm not standing here to accept applause. The clicks slowed. Journalists leaned forward. I'm not standing here because I want to be a hero, or a trending topic, or a viral video. Her gaze swept across the crowd, sharp but not cruel, soft but never fragile. I'm standing here because the people of this country deserve to know that someone, anyone, is still willing to say out loud what's true. She paused, no teleprompter, no spin, only presence. The President of the United States let his son take blood money. That money came from poison. That poison killed Americans. And the tools of our own government were used to help it cross our borders. The air thickened. You could almost hear hearts adjusting their rhythms. Let me say this as plainly as I can. No one, no matter their title, no matter their last name, is allowed to sell out this country for profit. Another pause, not dramatic, intentional, surgical. Not for $108 million, not for re-election, not for legacy. She exhaled once, a breath that sounded less like relief and more like recoil from the truth she had carried alone for far too long. We have watched for years as power was twisted into protection, as wealth became insulation, as the rule of law became a shield for the powerful and a sword for the powerless. Then finally her voice cracked, just a little, not from weakness, from depth. I didn't come here to make noise. I came to draw a line between what is tolerated and what must never be tolerated again. The crowd was still. No one moved. A lone camera drone hovered overhead, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. This isn't about me. It's not even about him anymore. It's about us. It's about whether this country will finally decide not who we've been, but who we're willing to become. She took one step back, not to leave, but to let the echo breathe. Tonight we make a choice. Justice not in theory, but in motion. Accountability not as theater, but as law. And integrity not as a slogan, but as our spine. Then the final words, the ones that would live longer than the scandal, longer than the trial, longer than the history books that would try to condense it all into 3 bullet points. This is not a victory speech. This is a reminder that this government belongs to the people, not to the families who think they own it. And if we ever forget that again, we won't deserve what comes next. She stepped back. The lights didn't fade. The press didn't shout questions. And Jasmine Crockett, once underestimated, once ignored, turned without applause and walked away from the podium. Because some moments don't need to be celebrated. They only need to be remembered. In the silence after Jasmine walked away, the message remained. Not as an echo, but as a mirror. This was never about bringing down a man. It was about standing up for a principle that no one, not even a president, is above the people they swore to serve. Power may speak loudly, but character, real character, endures in quiet, relentless truth. And if one voice can hold the line, then so can we all. Not for applause, but because some lines once drawn must never be crossed again. If this story stirred something in you, don't scroll. Sit with it, share it, speak on it. Send it to someone who still believes that truth deserves more than applause. It deserves action. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where silence doesn't get the last word. Hit the bell, because the next chapter isn't polished. It's dangerous, and it might just change how you see loyalty, leadership, and lies. This story is a fictional dramatization, but the systems, the grief, the fight for accountability, they're as real as the silence we've tolerated too long. Thanks for watching. Justice isn't given, it's demanded in public, on record, without fear. This is Harrison Stories.